Ken Robinson is the director of content for Elite Prospects, and he joins us on Tuesdays. How you doing?
I'm doing well, fellas. How you guys doing?
Yeah, good. We're going to get into your wheelhouse here with prospects and the World Jrs coming up. But first, some Vancouver Canucks talk. What do you make of the JT Miller trade talk with the New York Rangers? Cam, do you think that Chris Drury and the Rangers are so desperate now that they are willing to overpay, move sun, moon, and stars to get JT Miller back on Broadway?
Because they are on fire in the bad way right now, the New York Rangers.
You know, they always say you don't know you're in the good old days until they're gone. And I think last season was the last of the good old days for this Rangers core. But if they believe in their heart of hearts that they're like, we can still push, we've got a contention window that's still just squeaking open, and if we hammer it open with JT Miller, maybe you can throw some anvils at him, throw some trade offers that really benefit the Canucks a ton. Obviously, JT's got to sign off on it. Whoever's coming back from the Rangers has probably got a no trade or a no move. They got to sign off on it. Mid-season trades, dealing with guys that are making $7-8 million or packages that are going up that high, it's difficult to do. But if it's Keandre Miller's coming back as part of the package, someone that could really help the blue line out for a long time. Is it Lafreniere? I very much doubt it. But a collection of picks and prospects attached. It's all pretty far-fetched, I would think, at this point. But I do think the Rangers are just ripe to make a real panic move here, and someone could benefit from it.
It's a weird scenario for the Canucks too, given where JT Miller is at right now on a personal leave. Like, not that they're fanning the flames here, but it puts them in a weird light because, to be even fielding is strong because nothing prevents a team from calling, obviously, but even listening to offers from another GM, it's just an awkward moment right now for the Canucks.
It is, and I'm sure Alvin's probably just saying that right off the hop is like, nothing's getting done until JT comes back, and he's ready to come back, and so I'm sure that is you be derelict in your duties to not answer the phone and listen to what people have to say. But you're right, it is just a very odd, awkward situation with this player that is away from the team for whatever reason. They hope that he comes back and he's healthy and mentally ready to go, and then maybe you look at it, and if some of the whispers are that there is some contention in that dressing room. You probably would have known that before you gave him that big contract. You probably would have known that before you gave Pettersson that big contract. See, you went in with your eyes wide open. So this shouldn't be news to the Canucks. I guess it just matters if they think that they can really improve their team by moving Miller. And that's kind of the end of the day question.
A lot easier to just move Niels Höglander, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Who's going to get to that?
Improve that way.
Yeah. And in that regard, there's lots of talk. I do think that Höglander, we're saying that they're answering the phone. I think they're probably picking up the phone a little bit more with Höglander too. I saw Dollywell talking about Columbus is super interested. Is it Cole Sillinger? Is it a guy like Jordan Harris who, more of a bottom of the lineup on the blue line who can play both sides? He could fill in on the left. He can fill in on the right. He's in sheltered minutes. He's a pretty useful player. He had some pedigree that hasn't really matched up yet. But to me, I just keep coming back to Marcus Pettersson. Get all the Petterssons, bring them all into town and have a good time with it, because in the short term, he can replace Hronek on that top pair, adequately. And then when Hronek's back healthy, he slides down, he kicks Susi down, everything kind of slides down. He's not a right shot guy, I know. And he's a UFA, so you're paying something for a guy that you probably can't keep or might not be able to keep. But for right here and now, he probably makes the most sense on paper.
So you'd be comfortable with him on the right side, Cam? Like, he's played the right side adequately, Pettersson?
He has played some there. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know if that's what they would want to do, or if they just keep Myers up there and they'd slide him onto the second pair.
What about you did mention Severson or Provorov there in Columbus? Severson, it's an onerous contract. Provorov, well, you tell me, why not Severson or Provorov?
Yeah, Severson, I just wouldn't want to commit to that deal long term. Probably, maybe the pro scouts in Vancouver disagree with that. Provorov, I'd be okay with, just because the contract isn't too ornery, and he's a good player. He has been a better player at times, and I think that if you put him into a really strong leadership group and with Rick Tocchet at the helm, maybe that could work out in the short term. You give him the taste. You see if you want to extend him. Maybe you don't, but at the very least, he's a player who you can put in right now into your top 4, and you can feel comfortable rolling out there. So I think that's definitely an option. I'm not sure if Columbus is feeling the same way too, just after moving out Urasek too.
And lastly, on Columbus, I know Höglander is the trade chip that you're looking at to fix your defense needs. But for me, if Cole Sillinger is available, I said it yesterday, run, don't walk to Central Registry. Where are you on Sillinger?
Yeah, Sillinger, he's a fun player. He's one of these guys, and we talked about it last week too, is quit rushing players. Like Columbus, they rushed him out too. They put him in the bigs. I was clamoring for him to get sent back to go play at the World Juniors when he was a 19-year-old, even though he'd been in the NHL for a year and a half, just to kind of find that offensive juice, get that confidence back rolling against his age group. Didn't happen, obviously. So he's one of these players. He is kicking a little warm right now, though. You know, he's got like 5 or 6 points in his last 5 games. He's supposed to be a really strong two-way kind of hard-nosed player, and that defensive 200-foot game hasn't really developed all that well in that Columbus system, but still super young, you know, has the pedigree as a top 12 pick. I'm with you, is that if it's Höglander for Sillinger, I make that trade. And then I look to move something else to get a defender elsewhere, just because it's an upside bet, right? I think he has a higher ceiling than Höglander does, and he fits the middle of the ice, you know, situation that they could definitely use some help with too. So yeah, I'd be keen on making that deal too.
Where are you on the Canucks, who are not teaming with prospects just yet, but they are a contending team in sort of the larger contending category? Where are you on them trading first-round picks to get better before the end of the season? How valuable to the Vancouver Canucks is a 23rd overall pick right now when they want to make it to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round?
Now you're asking a prospect guy, right? You're asking
I know, that's
scout
why
in
I'm
the room
asking.
here, and so this is why it's going to hold so much more weight. Is trade them, move them all, like just get them out of there. Is that you only have a window for so long. And if you believe your team can win as much as this team, you know, thinks that they can win and that they can push and be a legitimate contender, ship them out, right? Would
you do it for a rental?
25th?
Like, would you do it for a high-profile rental? Yeah,
I would. Absolutely, I would. Now, would I attach Lekkerimäki or Tom Wielander onto a first-round pick to get a rental? Probably not, because you have, like you said, they are very few and far between on the potential impact prospects, and eventually you do need guys pushing up, and that's how you actually maintain a contention window over like longer than a 2-year stretch, is that you need guys pushing up, and those are the 2 guys that are going to have to push up. So and that's what teams are going to want to, right? They're not going to want the 25th or 26th overall pick. They're going to want your top prospect. So that's where things are going to get dicey, and that's where organizations that have 4 or 5 top prospects and they have their late first and they have multiple seconds, they're the ones that are going to be able to outbid Vancouver in these situations. So it's going to be, probably won't be going big game hunting too much of a degree, but maybe that second tier, right? Maybe that second, third tier. And if you trust your scouts and they do some good pro scouting, you might be able to pull as much or better value than some of those top guys that move organizations. Because these trade deadline moves are the ones that happen, 3 weeks before. Is that just because you're the biggest name on the market doesn't mean you're going to, inflict the most value for your team down the stretch and into the playoffs too. So it's all about identifying the right talent that's going to fit with your organization. And yeah, if that involves moving a first or a second, 25th in a 25 or a 26 first round pick, I'm all for it.
Is Danila Klimovich resurrected his asset value to some degree, do you think? I mean, he's not slowing down, and the goals that he's scoring are very nice. Whether that's for them as a prospect to actually use or to dangle, is there something there for Klimovich right now?
I mean, he's feeling hot, and the kid's been streaky his whole life. Like that's why he ended up getting drafted where he was, because he got on a heater at the U18s when Benning was sitting there front row, and that's why they took him over Logan Stankoven, who was right down the road doing it all the time, forever. So yes, he can be a streaky scorer. He's always had a wicked release. He's always had a bit of a nasty streak to him, and when you put those two things together, then they look really good. And then, he can just go dark and be dormant for stretches too. So I hope that this is some sort of resurrection and he's taking some steps developmentally, and he can find that, and he can one day become kind of that bottom 6 mean guy that can maybe score a couple pretty goals that get you out of your seat. But if he had any value on the trade market, I'm sure the organization would be very quick to package him up into a trade, because they have no allegiance to him. They didn't draft him. I'm sure they, like everybody else, feel that was a poor pick in hindsight, and probably in foresight at the very moment it was made. But yeah, I hope the best for him. I hope he does turn into a player and it works for him either in this organization or another one.
I would like to see him at the NHL level because he scores some beautiful goals, but we'll see. Help me out getting back to the first round here, Cam. I've heard 2025 is a weak draft, so you tell me whether you concur. Let's say the Canucks have picked like 25, which means they once again got to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Maybe it's later, but let's just play ball with 25. What would that be equitable to, say, was it the 2023 draft that was really good and everybody liked? Like, give me the comparison to what a late first rounder this year would be like compared to a strong draft.
Yeah, it's a second. It's a dart, right? Maybe it's pick 35, maybe it's pick 40. It is a weaker draft this year. Like the top 4-5 players, very, very interesting, very high end. And then we have our scouting meeting this weekend coming up, and it's like, who we putting at 6? Like there's half a dozen names there, and none of them I would feel all that great about taking at 6 overall. So it kind of gets to that point quickly, and then the depth does run light. So it is overall, I would say, a weaker draft class. 24 was stronger. 26 is projecting to be stronger. But again, it often will project these things out a year or two in advance, and they look really strong, and then you get to it, and it's like, it's pretty mid. And so, yeah, it's for Vancouver, like I said, is to move out a late first round pick. You could definitely frame it or couch it in your meetings as being like, this is kind of more like a early to mid second round pick value that we're trading away. The only problem is that every other GM knows that too.
So, just to be clear, the 5 are James Higgins, Porter Martone, Michael Misa, Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman, and is McQueen the center or Frondell the center? McQueen,
no, it's Roger McQueen.
Center?
Yeah, 6'5" center. Yeah.
Right.
Frondell is slipping a lot.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
It's World Junior season, Cam, and the first thing I'll say, I have tremendous regard for Al Murray, Hockey Canada's head scout. He was responsible for those 5 straight gold medals in the aughts. He helped build LA Kings Stanley Cup champions and Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup champions. So I got a ton of time and respect for Al Murray. And anyone who's familiar with that tournament will tell you it's a 19-year-olds tournament, not an 18s or 17-year-olds. Players do grow. They do get better in those intervening years, and you want to take the most 19-year-olds possible. That said, this is the first time in anybody's memory where a 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 9th overall pick from the previous draft were left off even the camp
selection
roster.
camp. We're not talking the roster.
Camp roster.
Yeah.
Let alone 6 of the top 9 OHL scorers were left off this list, and 3 of the top 4 scoring OHL blue liners were left off this list. Not to mention the 2 top under 20 scorers in the queue were left off the Canadian World Junior Camp list. What do you make of the group that Canada is bringing to its World Junior Camp and the omissions from Canada's World Junior
Travis
Camp?
Green said he'd be surprised if there were 10 better defensemen than Carter Yukemchuk.
I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like every year with Canada, there's snubs that we can dissect because it's Canada. They have so many options. And sometimes they do get a little galaxy brain on it, trying to get, you got to get your shooter, your playmaker, and your banger on your line. You got to get that chemistry a la NHL 94. But at the same time, like I did some digging on this. So Beckett Seneca, 3rd overall pick, he is going to be, you have to go back 35 years, and that puts 2 3rd overall picks that weren't in the NHL that didn't play in the World Juniors that next year. JP Dumont's the only one in the last 35 years with Seneca, okay? TJ Ginla, he's battling an injury. Okay, so he wasn't going to be 100%, so that's why he's not there. But my goodness, Zane Parekh, can you honestly look in the mirror and be like, there is a better offensive defenseman than this kid? Yeah, I know he makes some mistakes. He takes some chippy penalties, and defensively he can be porous. But you pay that man to create and produce offense. So if he's not there, Matthew Schaefer, his potential of making that team just skyrocketed because I talked to a scout and he was just saying like, Schaefer's got to beat out Parekh. And he's got to beat out Yakimchuk. Well, neither of those guys are there, right? So there's a lot of omissions, and if Canada, bows out in the quarters or something like that, everyone's going to be hollering. But at the same time, there's so much talent on that team still that they can still go in there as the favorite with the team that they're bringing too. So I'm like you, is that you got to respect the work that they're doing. They're trying to create a team. They're not trying to create an all-star team. It's a team that's trying to win a short tournament on a big stage. But at the same time, I'm probably extending a few more invites to a couple of those high-end players. Maybe not bring in a couple of those depth role players. You don't need, because you're going to cut a few of them too. Is that maybe you brought some more talent in and left a little more of the jam behind, and then you make your team from there. If there's injuries at camp, you've already got them there ready to go. So it is definitely going to be interesting to watch, and there is going to be some big name players that aren't going to be there. And I know some of the GMs and some of the teams are pretty disappointed that those guys didn't even get the invite. But they also, like you said, Matt, they recognize it is a 19-year-old tournament, and it's tough to crack when you're 17 or 18.
And if you're bringing a kid, so like I understand, then you go with big kids like a Porter Martone. Okay, that invitation I get. But McKenna over Misa, that one's a little surprising.
No, McKenna over Misa all day. McKenna's the best player in the CHL. He's
really wow.
He's tremendous, and what he's done internationally for Canada already is like he's a lock, I think, for that team. He's so impressive. He's better than Misa, I think, for sure. But at the same time, like if it's me, I get bringing Porter Martone. He's a big kid. He's a highly talented kid. But Misa brings a little more. He brings more speed. He can play the middle of the ice. I think he leads the OHL in faceoffs wins. So you slide him as your 13th forward, and all of a sudden your second line center goes down. Boom, he can slide into that role. Porter Martone can't, right? Like he's going to have to play down the lineup. He could be your net front guy or maybe the bumper guy in the power play on the second unit. So it's just different roles. And he's not that physical either. Like he's not going to go bang. Martone, that's not his role. Maybe he will with Canada with the jersey on. But he's a leader. He's a great player. So it makes a lot of sense. But it is kind of neat to see that we have Martone and Schaefer and McKenna, three underage guys coming to camp. And I expect all three to make the team too.
Wow.
And from a Canucks perspective, Sawyer Minio for Canada, the third-round defenseman playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds, Tom Wielander, with Sweden, of course, in a sophomore season at Boston University. Do either of the Swedish wingers, Ulriksson or Fernström, do you give them any chance to make the Swedish team at this World Juniors?
I was thinking about it before coming on here, and I think Ulriksson he's a dark horse. He's a dark horse. I was actually trying to poke around to see if I could get the camp invite list early, and I didn't get to pull it before I got on here. But I have a feeling he maybe might get the invite. He's never played internationally with them before, which is always hard to break into as a 19-year-old because they know those players so well, the ones that they've worked with at the U17, at the U18, at the Helenka, right? They have that history with them. But Ulriksson, a point-of-game player, so big, so rangy, can play the middle of the ice, can play the wing, can get the net front for you, can be physical. Something that Swedish team's probably going to need some banging, right? So I think he's an interesting one that if he gets an invite, maybe he can make some noise at camp.
And Fernström's had a good season.
He has had a good season, and he's a pure offensive guy. I don't love the foot speed, and I'm going to get chirped by some Canucks scouts as soon as I say that. But he's high IQ offensively, and he's a pure offensive player. So if Frundell is injured still, if Victor Eklund, another high 25 kid, if he's, I think he's got a concussion right now. Well, hopefully that he comes back. He took like a referee's knee in the face or something recently. If those guys aren't available, does that open up an opportunity for them to bring in a more offensive player like Fernström to give him a look? So I think both are dark horses, but I give the edge to the 19-year-old in Ulriksson that he might be able to squeeze in there.
Having a very nice year with Guelph in the OHL, 19 points, 9 goals in 20 games, and you can't teach 6'6", 235 to 240.
And on North American ice and all that.
That's it. In Canadian cauldrons, if you're Sweden, you have been intimidated over the years.
Yes.
So that is something you have to
You've
keep.
looked flimsy,
Yes,
so don't be flimsy.
Marvelous stuff. Love your expertise on the prospects and beyond, Cam Robinson. We'll catch up next Tuesday.
All right. Thanks, fellas.